Welcome to the Play Ed 3 podcast, where you're the reoccurring guest, whether you're in the classroom or shaping education behind the scenes. I'm Tisha Poncio.
And I'm Rick Butterworth. Together, we bring stories, insights, and conversations that matter to educators, learners, and change makers. Our goal is to bring everyone together to learn, grow, and play. Welcome to the Play Ed 3 podcast. My name's Rick, and as always, I'm here with my co-host Tisha. Now, I always get told that I'm not allowed to ask this one question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Tish, how are you?
Let's see. I'll give you how I am in 6 words, if I could maybe do that.
6 words. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. 4 15-year-old boys sleepover.
I must admit, when you said 4:15, I thought you were giving me lottery numbers then.
No, Jace had a sleepover yesterday, and I think because he's the third child and I'm the mom that's like, yeah, of course, like, just come over. You want to wrestle for 14 hours in my house and be really loud? Okay. But like at 2 a.m., that's not great. But
it's the last thing you need.
I didn't get a lot of sleep, but I will say I love hanging out with them because I always learn so much from them. Mm-hmm. And they obviously learned so much from me. I took them on a little, we did a little field trip to the grocery store, the market, the shop, as you would say in the UK. Yep. And I just had to go in for oat milk, and it always becomes this really big lesson. So I always love hanging out with them, but they are exhausting. So I'm a little tired today. Have an extra shot of espresso in my coffee.
Good. You've got your caffeine, you've got your adrenaline, you're ready to go for this new episode.
Well, I'm really ready to go because we have one of my favorite people in the world on this episode. And say that again?
Oh, that was really nice.
No, it's true. So Becky Keene is an educator, an author, a speaker. She's focused on innovative teaching and learning. And I've known Becky for years. I can't even pinpoint the beginning of my knowledge of who Becky was, what she's about, but she is a leader, a thought leader. And so when I say words like esports or immersive learnings or, games or AI and education, Becky comes to mind. And this isn't my first podcast with Becky, actually, Rick. I'm not sure if you know that, but I did a podcast with Becky when I worked at Wakelet, and I was doing Women in Tech. We were doing a series.
Yeah. And I remember those.
Yeah. So Becky was one of my guests, and it's so amazing and brilliant to have seen how our journeys have brought us back to this same spot. And she's a new book out. She's the author of a new book called AI Optimism, which we're going to dive deep into. And I have a lot of questions. I know you do too for Becky. But what I would love to ask Becky, are you ready for question 1, Becky?
I'm so ready.
Okay. So what is something about AI in education that no one wants to say out loud that you're willing to say right now?
We don't know enough yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with that.
That's good.
I'm sure there's people who are saying that too. I think there's a lot of flags being put up. Like we have a great group of people doing a really great job with, wait a minute, hang on, this is a problem. And that's important and relevant, and we should be hearing those voices and taking them seriously. We also have a group who are pretty committed to, this is great. It's the wave of the future. This is everything we should be doing. And I hope that AI Optimism gives people a balance of, yeah, I'm optimistic, but I'm not just like embracing everything under the sun because it's the cool new thing. That's not the point. And so I think we don't know enough yet. And it's okay to be hesitant and pragmatic, but also optimistic and, full of potential and I don't see a lot of neutral voices. I feel like people just in general are either like, we're so concerned, or do it all.
It's so interesting because I love that, and I also feel like I go from one side to the other, kind of depending on the day, depending on how it is in context. What are we talking about? What, it is like I go from being very hesitant, but then I also really believe that our students need to know how to do anything AI. And that includes the whole umbrella of digital citizenship and information literacy, all of it. They need to have those skills because they're going to go out into this world. And I feel and fear that they may be unequipped, right? And I'm going to bring up something later because I have another question, and it is a hot topic in education, specifically in Texas, which is why I'm going to ask you about it because I want to know your thoughts around it. But I'm going to let Rick kind of ask questions because it could be a Tisha Becky podcast again. We want to let Rick's voice be heard. So,
well, the big question is, do you really want to? I mean, you've got two amazing people on this. I know I'm going to learn a hell of a lot on this podcast. So I could literally sit here with a cup of tea, sit back, put my slippers on and listen to it while you two talk about everything that's going on. But I think one of the questions I have, just going off what you were just saying, how do we get to a point where we can actually start to find a middle ground with AI? Because as Tish mentioned, I'm exactly the same as her. I can absolutely love AI when it's something that's really helpful for me, but then there's areas where I specialize in that I am concerned about. And it does come down the lines of like creativity, when you've got people building websites or doing design work and stuff. And I've watched some videos and stuff, and there's proof of people saying, oh, I'm a digital artist, and all they've done is create an image using AI, and they're claiming to be a digital artist. But then you've got people who actually have created a mashup of images. I mean, I've seen someone Photoshop them having a McDonald's with a panda in a living room, all through Photoshop. This was 15 years ago, before AI became a thing. But how do we, in your own thoughts, how do we find a middle ground where we can have that balance of not going all in and also not being like full blown, we're not having it?
I think some of that tension comes from pride. I can't think of the right word. Pride is probably not the right word, but it just comes from this deep desire we have to feel empowered as humans, to feel original, to feel unique, to feel that our ideas have value that are above the value of machines. And so when we're feeling replaced or, just moved out of a position of creativity, of things that are traditionally the human spirit, that feels more uncomfortable. I don't think any of us feel uncomfortable with efficiency and productivity machines, right? We're like, yes, please, Roomba, vacuum my house. Yes, please move my junk email to my junk folder. Those AI automations we're thrilled with. We're thrilled with mapping tools, right? Things that make our lives better. It's when the tools come into our human wheelhouse that we start to feel like, hang on a minute, why are you giving my child advice on a problem? They should be going to a trusted adult, right? Or a mature friend. Or, hey, why are you creating art? That's something that was reserved for humans. And so we have this tension where I think as a global world, it is going to take time for us to realize, where is the assistance support? Where are we willing to give that? Where are we willing to say, this art was generated by AI? And let me give you an example. So I don't know the movie industry by heart, but so I'm just envisioning, someone who is in final production of a film. They're using CGI, right? They're using color correction. They're using audio correction. We have whole industries of people who are creating sound effects that are not real, that they overlay into the audio, right? And the soundtrack, and everything's coming together, and it's giving us this final production that is 100% not the reality of what was filmed and captured. And we know that because the film industry is transparent. They show us the background. We have video. We know that it's not real, but we're thrilled with the outcome. And I think we can get there with AI as we start to really understand where was the AI contributing and where were humans contributing and still love the final product. Does that make sense?
It
Yeah.
absolutely makes sense. I'm like sitting here, it resonates with me so much because you're talking about transparency. And I think when there is no transparency for parents or teachers, really anybody with AI, it does feel like this emotional attack. I mean, I'm bringing emotions into it. You start thinking about that. It is an emotional attack. And so you start thinking about how AI, just the subject of it, truly, for some people is so triggering, and it triggers them into this tailspin of emotions because they're feeling replaced. I mean, I think there's so much, so much psychology. Like that is kind of where, I'm not going to say this, what I want to say, because what I was going to say, and y'all know if I say the thing, it's going to happen. So I'm being very careful what I'm saying here. What I would love to do in my extra free time is maybe study and deep study the psychology and the AI, because I believe that there is so much there that is really triggering people in general to look in the mirror at their own lack of emotional intelligence, if you will. So it's kind of like, I feel like there is the artificial intelligence, and then you have people who are walking around and they don't have the emotional intelligence. That's one of the things that we talk about in our book, kind of leading students to learn that, because for the three of us, I think we can sit here and have a very calm discussion, maybe even not agree on certain things, but I'm not going to be emotionally triggered by you, Becky, or Rick on your beliefs, but I don't know that everybody is to that point. I do think you're absolutely right, though. It's the transparency. And so when people feel like you're hiding something from them or withholding something from them, it's really a recipe for disaster. And I think it's an incredible point.
And can I just expand on that for a moment?
Yes.
So carrying the movie analogy or a book analogy, really anything that's published. If we assume as a society, as a world, there's been editing done to a movie, that there's been production done to a music track, that there's been editing to a manuscript, that the author didn't write 100% of those words, that an editor came alongside and developed it and copy edited it and gave advice, right? We expect those things in society. So I do think we're going to get to a point as a world where we expect that people used AI to help. But we're not there yet. We don't expect it. We still want people to add a little asterisk, right, to the end of everything they produce and say, oh, well, tell me how you're using AI in this. And it's not fair if you did. But we have all these other examples of produced work in life where we expect people to have gotten assistance and help, and we know the final product is not what the original sounded like or looked like or read like. So again, I think there's a lot of parallel here. We're just not that far along yet. AI is still so new that it feels scary and
don't you think, Becky, that it was the same mindset around social media when it came on scene and everybody? I remember everyone in my circle of spaces everywhere, including and especially parents. They were like, social media is the devil, no social media, no phones, no this, no that. And I think there is a mindset around things that are fearful. And how do we balance the fear with the openness to what you said, getting that openness to the expectation? How do we, as thought leaders, those that are listening, the educators, the leaders in the ed tech industry, whatever your role is, how do we help balance out the fear and then the expectation?
it has to be normalized, right? It has to become how we do business. It has to become how people just live, where it used to be you were unique if you were posting often to Instagram, and that was, oh, that's what those people do. And now it's multi-generational. We have, people who are sharing with their families just photos of their grandchildren and their trips, and that just feels very normal. It doesn't feel scary to say, oh yeah, I shared that on Instagram, right? That just feels like a normal daily business. No one's surprised by that. And we've also, over many years, many years, adopted some kind of unspoken societal rules. Like if I was with the three of you, or the two, sorry, the three of us, the two of you, the three of us, we're out to lunch and we took a photo. Because of the space we work in, I would feel comfortable just posting that without talking to you about it, right?
Yes.
Because we're all present on social media. But if I was there with some personal friends, I might say, hey, do y'all mind if I post this? Right? Especially if there were kids in the photo. If there's kids in the photo, like everyone in my circle goes, hey, are you okay if I post this?
Sure.
Because we have that societal norm set up, and that took time. And we don't have those societal norms with AI yet. And so we're kind of having to pull people along into this, like, okay, what are we going to claim? And what are we going to asterisk? And what are we going to share? And what do we just expect will be the reality? We expect that people add filters to their Instagram photos. No one posts a little asterisk, this has been filtered. Like, no one does that. Right?
I'm going to start doing that, Becky. I'm just going to start doing it now. Asterisk, I used a filter. Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, we even have the hashtag no filter because people are so proud of when they aren't.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, there's just so many parallels in the world of social media, technology, where we see very similar behaviors. And again, we're just not there yet because AI is still, from a generative perspective, so incredibly new.
Yeah. Yeah. That leads me into really just like you said, there are so many parallels. So with everything, we talk about equity. And so I'm interested to know, how do you think AI will widen or close equity gaps in schools? And how much do you feel like is really a teacher mindset versus like tech access? Talk to me about that and how those two would play into the equity.
So I believe that to date it's widening the gap. And the reason I say that is because what I see is that super innovative schools who were already doing very innovative things, parents who are already familiar with technology, who are comfortable with the latest, greatest thing. And this is just a broad stroke, right? We're not, I mean, there's an exception to everything, and this is just majority, right? But I do see those types of environments where kids would have been thriving anyway in a digital space are continuing to thrive in a digital space. I was very comfortable early on to give my kids access to generative AI. First of all, they were the right age.
Yeah.
My daughter was 13 when it came out, so it was like, oh, you're even, legally acceptable. Yes. And she's my youngest. So it was like, I had high comfort level with that. I know families who don't, let their kids have it on their phones. Yeah. They're comfortable with them having TikTok.
Yes.
But they're not comfortable with ChatGPT. So it's really an interesting shift. And I do, we see it all the time that schools that are underrepresented communities, schools that don't have access to resources, parent mentors, lots and lots of upskilling training, they're falling behind. And what's really upsetting to me is that the students who have access through home and through, their innovative environments to these tools, they're competing for the same jobs, scholarships, and opportunities as the kids who don't. And so now we have this other differentiator in a skills environment, right? Where it took schools a long time to focus on the things that higher education cares about, like test scores and SATs and grades and GPAs and volunteer portfolios, and like all of that is true. But now we have like one more thing that spreads the gap. And what's I think the most painful is that it could be the greatest equalizer we have. And that is what is so disappointing to me. And I'll just tell a little example of that. So my daughter was working on an essay just this last year as a 14-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
and she was kind of struggling to come up with, it was a new genre for her. Like she'd
Mm-hmm.
never had to write this type of essay.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
She had a lot of questions and she didn't feel like the instructions were super clear. And so she was using Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, and she asked, like, explain to me this type of essay. And then she goes, okay, write an example of this type of essay for an 8th grade student. And then she legitimately did, she showed me later. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
look what I did. And she's like, now I have such a better understanding of this. And so then she started writing her essay on her own, right? And then she kind of got stuck and she asked it, she was like, here's what I'm writing, what can I add to it? Used it as a tutor all on her own, then asked it for feedback. And she showed this to me and she said, Mom, I got better feedback from this than I ever have
Cheers
from a
to
teacher
that.
in my life. Yeah. She's like,
Yes.
because it was real time. I could ask it all the
Yes.
questions I wanted. It gave me
Yes.
encouragement. She goes, normally teachers just tell you what you did wrong, which is true.
It's
We're,
so
we're there
interesting
to
that you
coach.
said that because I am cheers. Our whole episode, I think it was the last one, or I don't know, Rick. I'm confused on
Yep.
where our episodes are at this point, but we did a whole presentation on feedback and reflection and we talked to an actual student, and I'm going to just validate everything she's saying. The student is like, here are the pieces of feedback I get from my teachers that are unhelpful. Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here are examples from a few teachers who give me really impactful feedback. And so to see those side by side, and then to her point, she can ask as many questions as she wants to clarify and understand. And I think that is so powerful for our students. Tell me
Okay,
how
and
that ended, because she did
yeah.
the assignment, right?
So back
Did
to
she?
equity.
Yeah.
The end of her sharing this with me was she looked at me and said, her little face was like, oh, this reality check. And she just looked
Yeah.
at me and she said, Mama, every kid on the planet has
Mhm.
access to this.
Everyone.
Like everyone could be doing this. And she said, why? She said, why don't our teachers tell us we can? Like, I don't understand.
So that is interesting. Why do you believe, and where do
Who's
you
equity
think,
that?
where do you think it's getting stuck? Because I think, is it the fear? And do you fear that districts, school systems are misusing or misinterpreting the AI tools that can be helpful to build student confidence?
I think we're so caught up on the cheating conversation that like no one can see the forest for the trees.
Agreed.
And we're so into control.
Ooh, that's it right there.
Right? Where it's like, well, the kids can use it the way I say they can use it. Right?
The
And we've got the
spoon
red light, green light
analogy.
charts
Mm-hmm.
where we're like, we're going to tell kids, and I appreciate giving kids clarity on
Yes.
here's what I expect for this assignment. I don't expect you to use your calculator on this part of the math test. Like,
Yes.
I appreciate the clarity. But what I don't appreciate is this high level of control where kids don't actually have an opportunity to reflect on the use of the tools and how they're using them appropriately or inappropriately to guide their learning. And we've got all these clickbait headlines about brain
Yes.
rot and the MIT ChatGPT study and all this stuff that's like causing people to catch on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of taking a step back and saying, okay, we need to be focused, kids, on how does this limit my learning? Does it limit my learning? Or is it enhancing my learning? Like instead of that focus, as a education culture, we've responded with control, lockdown, monitoring, red light, green light, right? And it's like, and then we complain that kids can't make decisions.
Oh
We're
my
like, well,
gosh.
we
Becky
remove
Keene.
the critical thinking activity.
Becky Keene, thank you so much for saying that. I feel like that. Rick, do you have a button that's like applause? I know you do over there somewhere. There's an applause button somewhere. But here's the thing. I talk about that exact piece all the time. And it is something that, we wrote our book. Our book is written really for that idea. For years, the adults around me were complaining about students. And it would be like, They don't know how to use their cell phones appropriately. They don't know how to make change at the cash register. They don't know how to do eye contact with me. And it was like everybody was complaining about it. And I was like, are you just expecting them to know how? Like, we all have to contribute to that education. And so we can't keep placing the blame on other people or putting the responsibility on them. But you said this thing about control and compliance. And this is leading me, Rick already knows where I'm going with this because it's a very hot topic for me. So I don't know if you've read this in the news, but Texas has a House Bill 1481, and I'm going to read it to you. This was the proposal. I'm going to just briefly kind of read it. We went over this in our other podcast episode in depth, but essentially, as of August 1st, so in a couple of days, this recording will be out past that, but August 1st is when it is going out. So personal device use by students completely prohibited. Personal wireless communication devices, any wireless electronic device other than the device provided by the school for instructional purposes, including cell phones, text messaging devices, laptop computers, tablet computers. So they're going to prohibit students from using personal wireless communications during instructional time. But what I am also going to pull up, because I kind of want to give you all the context, there's lots of articles out there on this new Texas law that's banning mobile phones. Every district is putting something out, but essentially this bill was signed into law by my favorite governor in the whole world, insert sarcasm, Governor Greg Abbott. And it's a hot take on this, but August 4th, it begins on August 4th. So all the districts are putting statements out there, all these articles. I even read one on our episode about, ISTE had something, just talking about cell phones and how you're increasing engagement without the cell phones. And my question to that on the previous episode was, how are you defining engagement? Does engagement to you mean compliance and control? Because then, yes, that's what it would mean. So I'm interested to know, like, kind of what are your ideas around this? And do you feel like this is a knee-jerk reaction? And do you think that this is going to be a trend in education where we're just going to ban the things so that we can control the things?
Oh man, the cell phone conversation is so controversial and layered. I think our goal in education should be for kids to build healthy human connection. And we know the devices get in the way of that. So separate from academics, we know that if we walk into a secondary lunchroom and kids all are sitting on their phones, that is not healthy. So I am a fan of, like, hey, let's have phone-free lunch, or whatever the case may be, right? I'm also a fan of, I'm gonna add this to my to-do list on my mobile device, that my homework that I'm gonna now access. So again, another example from my own kids. My son is in a school that uses Microsoft Teams for assignments, and they were also told to have a planner. And my son was like, can I just put it in like a note, like a to-do list in my phone? But his school was like, no, because they don't allow phones out during instructional time. They actually drop their phones in like one of those shoe hanger things in the back of the classroom. And then they can say to their teacher, like, hey, can I go get my phone to take a picture of this? Or to, like, right, they can inquire it, they can use it. And he's like, I'm not going to ask every time I want to write down so we like write down a to-do. So we had to figure out, like, okay, what's a way that he could, write it on paper and then transfer it. And then, like, he doesn't always have the paper with him because now it's backpack it, like, it becomes a management nightmare. And that's not fair either. So I'm not a fan of unilateral decision-making that doesn't allow for the nuance and grayness of our lives. Like, any sort of, just big sweeping decision, I always tell my kids and my students, complex issues never have simple solutions. So we're trying to solve engagement, we're trying to solve human connection, we're trying to solve cheating, we're trying to solve all sorts of things, and our solution is, okay, ban it.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
never,
every
Which is
single
not
time.
the answer. It's not a solution because we've
no,
not
it's
really
not.
solved the problem. I
No,
think we are just adding to the
no,
problem.
Oh, and we've just lost her.
that's funny. Well, and the reality, we lost you for a minute. And the reality is, I don't think that, I don't think it's going to do what they hope it's going to do.
No, because I
Right.
think with what you're saying, because it goes very much with the AI side, that it's always one extreme or the other. You always go for, yeah, absolutely go for it. That's great. Or no, be resistant, full blown, and that's it. And they seem
Right.
to think that that's the answer every time. I think going back with the AI side though, because they've got a lot of people that are fearful of it. Obviously, we've gone through a lot of points of why people are fearful with cheating or taking my job or whatever it is.
Mhm.
The speed of AI
Yeah.
within absolutely anything, I think this has been probably the fastest growing of a sector or
Innovation.
whatever we want to,
Yeah.
innovation that we've ever seen, and the speed that it's happening and where it actually integrates into, because obviously it's not just in education, it's they're finding ways to use AI in absolutely anything. And
Right.
I just see that people are fearful of how fast it's actually growing, and trying to actually keep up with the whole thing is, we've already got enough things to be dealing with on our plates anyway, from personal to professional and world issues and everything, to be having to try and keep up with how fast AI is going. But I think, what what do you think are the biggest fears about how school systems might misuse or misinterpret AI?
I think student data and privacy is always an issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're concerned just as a society about our personal data and where that's going. I know that a lot of people in the ed tech industry and in the education industry are very concerned about students interacting with AI and where does that data go? And also,
Yeah.
are the responses appropriate? Are we keeping kids safe? And so
Mm-hmm.
it's not only about the output, like where is their data going, but it's also about that input of what's
Yep.
coming into our students. And we've seen, horrific, shocking examples of these large language models just fabricating highly inappropriate information, which is why I
Mm-hmm.
think Google is incredibly irresponsible in giving Gemini to everyone of every age level, just out of
Yep.
just unilaterally, we're just going to give it to everyone. 4-year-olds have Gemini sitting on their Chrome tablets,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's ready for that at all. Um, so that's just a whole separate issue. But generally, right, it's student safety. Where's
Yeah.
their data going and what's getting pushed into them that we now have no control over and also no oversight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
And
completely
I've
agree
seen,
with you.
oh, great. I've seen the argument on like, well, they're not going to be monitored as an adults, and that's true. But we
Mm-hmm.
also have a due diligence duty to our students. I mean, we
Yep.
have them on filters and networks on their school devices for a reason,
Yep.
because we want to be diligent in trying to keep kids safe, and everyone has a different definition of what safe looks like. So it's really tricky. Again,
Mm.
complex issues do not have simple solutions.
Yeah, completely agree. Because that's the thing I always look at. You're not going to just let a newborn just go run free all over the place out in the world. You're going to be protective of certain things and be gradual with it. By saying that, well, they're not going to have any issues with data or whatever when they're older and they're constantly using it and they're not in school. Fine, that's fair enough, but you can't just give them absolutely everything from the get-go and let them just try and defend for themselves in that kind of realm, especially with online. Data privacy is so important, with so many different data breaches and even content being sold left, right, and center because everybody wants to make money out of whatever they can at the time, and data
Mhm.
is one of those hot things. I completely agree with you there. Tish, welcome back to the podcast.
So sorry. You know what? I'm just making this a trending thing every week, unintentionally. So I'm back, and I know that we are running out of time. So I have have two things I need to ask Becky.
Okay.
Rick, I hope you'll just let me
Yeah, absolutely.
kind of take over for a second. But Becky, your new book, AI
Yes.
Optimism.
Yeah.
First of all, love the title. Love the title. Just came out June of 2025. If you have not heard of this book, I'm sure it will just take a very simple Google search, but Rick will put the link in the show notes so that people can go buy the book, share the book, review the book. And it's aimed at educators, right? So it is essentially for anybody across the spectrum, skeptics and enthusiasts. Yes, everybody in between.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What I would love to know, and this is like a question that's really just a Tisha question, because I am a nerd on SAMR model and TPAC. I'm pretty sure you use SAMR in your book, correct? And I would love to know, what was the reasoning behind why you chose SAMR over any of the other implementation models for technology? I'm just curious. It's just a Tisha curiosity question. So if you're a nerd like this, or you're an instructional technology specialist, you are going to want to hear Becky's answer on this. So why did you choose the SAMR model specifically?
It just made so much sense to me.
Yeah.
It made so much sense to say, because literally at its root, AI is substituting. Right? It's like that's the outsource that we all are happy about or angry about. Is it's just substituting human work. And so I started to see a trend that really bothered me, and that was that educators, very specifically, were so focused because they're high cognitive load and they're exhausted and they're tired and everything else. It's not a blame game.
Yes.
It's just the reality is, I would see posts on these sites that were like, can someone tell me how to make my slides with AI? Can someone tell me how to make with AI, make with AI, make with AI? And
Substitute.
it's just substitution. And I started to get legitimately sad around like, here we have this tool that for the first time in history of humanity is ubiquitous, is free, is like student safety aside, anyone can use this right now today. And I mean, 2 years ago, right? And here we are making worksheets. And Saba Kidway, who I really respect, said to me once, why are we using 21st century tools to do 20th century learning? And I think that's a really great quote, because it broke my heart. And when I look at SAMR, it just made sense to me to start helping people understand, like, yes, you are using this tool, and I'm glad that you're offloading some of your work, and here's the level you're using the tool at. However, you could choose, if you wanted to create an activity for your students in a way that adds some power and value. It doesn't take learning a different tool. It takes using the tool differently. And it's not this monster lift. I feel like people sometimes look at this end game result, the redefinition level of SAMR, and it feels really unattainable and really far away. And it's like, well, that doesn't work for me. My curriculum, my school system, you don't know my principal. I can't do that. Like, there's all these reasons. But to move along the framework and to say, okay, but I could augment. Like, I could just tweak that, and then people at the augment level, like, oh, I could modify. Like, I could go over there. I just felt like it was incremental innovation, which is something I've been talking about for 20 years.
Yeah.
Is like, how can we just shift a little bit? To me, it was an amazing fit. And
it's simple. It's simple for teachers to remember, right? Like the SAMR is so simple. And I love that you use that. One of the things, so that is what I used in my district when I was a tech coach. And I know it's not research-based, but it was simple for the teachers to use. And just like you said, it would just take one tiny tweak to get them from one of those to another one. And what I started realizing is that once you get to redefinition or, any of once you get there, you're like, oh, and you start then critically thinking and going, okay, it doesn't always have to go in a line. Maybe this particular thing is substitution, right? Maybe this is what I'm going to use it for. But it has the teacher then critically thinking their own assignments, their own instructional strategies, their own approaches. And so I did want to highlight that. We don't have a ton of time, but I do want to highlight that because I wanted you to really speak to that. I want people who are listening and maybe being a skeptic to AI, or maybe thinking that you can't do the thing.
Right.
you can, and it just takes a tiny tweak. And that's something that we talk about in our book. The same thing. Portfolios seem like this like exhausting project, and Rick and I say it's not a project. It's really it's a
an
process.
ongoing thing.
It's an ongoing process. It's a mindset, if you will. So listen, if you don't have Becky's book and you don't know what the SAMR framework is, you should go buy the book so that you can learn, because you are going to learn something, and you're also going to maybe adjust or tweak your mindset on AI, which is what we're challenging you to do. So Becky, before we transition really quickly into Juicebox Confessionals, can you just what is your last call to action for anyone listening today?
My last call to action is to, from an AI optimism perspective, I'm really encouraging people to focus on what they want to achieve for their students. Like, what's your vision? What's your pedagogy? What's your praxis? What do you want your students to know and be able to do? And then work backwards. Then choose a tool that matches your goals and expectations. Then figure out how to use the tool to do what you need, right? It's that work backwards. We don't start by saying, I want to use this with my kid.
No.
We start with, this is what I want for my students. And then we plan from there.
It's great advice. We
Amazing.
talk about that often.
Yep.
Okay, so Becky, this is called Juicebox Confessionals. This is just something we do at the very end to kind of give some fun to. So I just want you to picture you're like in 5th grade. You can pick a grade,
Capri
doesn't have to
Sun
be 5th grade.
in
You have a Capri Sun in one hand and a Lisa Frank folder in the other. Okay.
Absolutely. That's how old we are.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
And so what I want to know, I'm not going to ask you anything about music. What I would love to offline, we can talk about this. We can talk about Becky and auditory learning, which I find so fascinating. That's a whole nother episode.
Yep.
But I want to know, who was your AI crush before AI existed? That's what I want to know. So AI, so you want to be thinking like in the 90s, the 80s, was there a character from a movie or a tool that you were using that made you feel like you were in the future?
Okay. Let's see. Don't
worry, I'm as frozen as you are right now with this one.
Okay, so if I went with like a kid crush, like Zach from Saved by the Bell, obviously.
Yeah.
Or Slater, either one.
Yes.
Were amazing. And they were in high school before I was in high school, so it felt like I was, they were a little bit ahead of me. I don't even know if that's
well, no. And then I just want to like bounce off of that, because it made me, as you were answering, I was like, ooh, I've not asked anybody this, but what was the first technology like tool thing that you had in your hand that made you feel like, oh my gosh, the future is like, there's so many possibilities? Was it a computer, a typewriter? Like, what was it?
Yeah. When I was in like 3rd, 4th grade, so 8, 9 years old, I got to code programs like in DOS on the big like Apple IIe computers. And I remember making like a lemonade stand and a dating game, and that kind of stuff was like choose your own adventure, right? And yeah, I was so incredibly empowered by that. And that's
incredible.
I'm not like a coder now as an adult. I mean, it's way too complex. But at the time, I loved the logic of it. And I loved that I got to set what happened. Like, you're in control of the world.
You were the creator. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was the creator.
That's amazing.
I loved making games for other kids to play. Yeah.
I love this, Becky. I didn't know that about you. I think that's a fabulous place to end. We appreciate you taking time with us today to record and share about your book and share your thoughts on AI and cell phone policies, the problems that we're seeing and the solutions. We had so many things. Becky, where can everybody find you? Just verbally tell them, and we're also going to link it in the show notes as well.
Just BeckyKeene.com is the best landing page because it goes to everywhere. Like all my socials are linked there. My TikTok walks are linked. My blog is there. My books are there. And if you can't remember that, if you can just remember my name, if you search for Becky Keene, I come up, which is wonderful.
Absolutely.
So the BeckyKeene.com is the best landing page. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, you two. It's good to see you.
Thank you to everyone that was listening. If you want to follow the Playhead 3 podcast, all the links are in the show notes. We're on all social platforms. Thank you again for Becky to joining us. To everybody listening, we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for being a part of this episode. Continue the conversation with us online. Subscribe and follow, and let us know if you'd like to join as a guest or if there's someone you'd like to hear from.
We'd love to connect with you on X, Instagram, and TikTok. All links and show notes will be available in the episode description. Until next time, keep learning, growing, and playing.